Ritchie, Harris,
Here.
Werdeman, Darling, Tucker,
Here.
Fife,
Here.
Nate, Piper.
Here.
Thank you. All right, the first item on the agenda is approval of the agenda. Would anyone like to make a motion to approve the agenda for this meeting?
Make a motion to approve the agenda.
Thank you. A second. Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed, same sign. Okay, next item on the agenda, minutes approval for the October 22nd, 2024 meeting. Would anyone like to make a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved.
And second?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed, same sign. All right, public comments, Ed is not here. There's anybody here from the public, so we'll move on from that. So we'll move on to new business. Item 6A, review and consideration of the proposed Kentucky Ridge North 6th Street Urban Renewal Plan for its conformance with the Elevate Indianola Comprehensive Plan.
Thank you. So try to make this short and sweet. We had to redo our urban renewal area map because we got a couple of different projects that are requesting TIF financing, tax increment financing for part of the developments. So as part of that process, we have to re-identify certain districts in which these are located. For instance, this first one is for the Kentucky Ridge North 6th Street Urban Renewal Plan. Basically, we're looking, neither of these items will have votes. It's more of a, yes, it complies with the comprehensive plan, or no, it doesn't. So we're just looking for that conformity from you folks before we take it to city council. This first one, the Kentucky Ridge Elevate Indianola classifies this as regional mixed use, which allows multifamily residential up to 25 dwelling units an acre, retail offices, restaurants, bars, personal and business services, things of that nature, overnight accommodations, parks, open space and trails, and automobile-oriented uses, and then civic uses and places of worship. And then the low density or low medium density residential, it's residential development up to 15 units an acre, with a mix of housing types, including single family detached, single family attached, multifamily, condos, apartments, and student housing, civic uses, businesses that primarily serve residents, and then parks, open spaces, and trails. The purpose of this Kentucky Ridge North 6th Street plan is to provide opportunities, incentives, and sites to promote commercial development and townhome residential development and associated infrastructure, as well as facilitating a walkable community with direct access to the trail system. It also includes the placement of the Indianola Public Library and then improvement to blighted areas within this area. Additionally, the proposed plan is intended to facilitate new development in order to create employment opportunities and bring new economic investment interest to the area. The comprehensive plan was adopted in 2020, and that having a comprehensive plan is a requirement for having these urban renewal areas to provide TIF financing for developers. So we do recommend that this TIF district or the urban renewal area is in conformance with the comprehensive plan. Happy to take any questions. Also, Ben, who has kind of been spearheading the efforts, to answer any questions you have too.
I have a question. Why weren't these two together?
So
Is it because of geography?
yes, that's exactly it. So an urban renewal area just allows us to create a bucket by which tax dollars are segregated from their overall collection. And then through a TIF agreement, we can do different improvements. One of those improvements will be the Kentucky Ridge project, but we anticipate other projects along the 6th Street area where the city is going to be putting its library and other improvements in that area. And so it makes it easier to handle it all in one area.
Thank you. This didn't make sense to me other than because they were in the same geographic area.
Yeah.
just discussing, item 6A. It's not really like a pro event, it's just to see if we agree to be in conformity.
I can make that great presentation again for you, Carrie.
Do we have questions from anybody else in the commission? I guess as far as this item goes, then since we're not voting on it, how would we end and then move on from it?
So
Just say it's in conformity.
a general consensus that says it's in conformity.
So would you want more like a all those in favor?
All in agreement? I have a question with long-term planning. From here, where does it go from here? Does it go to city council? Is this a continuing study or for other potential TIF districts 5 years from now, 10 years from now? I mean, this is a snapshot in time.
Yeah, so this particular one is regarding the Kentucky Ridge townhomes, that development. That's kind of what triggered this one. It'll go to the next council agenda. And if Ben wants to touch on the other part of that.
Exactly. So there's a whole process when you create a urban renewal area. And now the state code requires that those are 20 years max for commercial and 10 years max for residential. In the creation, it establishes those dates and basically it creates that mechanism by which you can start to segregate those dollars out of the normal collection of property taxes. And those can be used for the urban renewal area. From that, you then have a development agreement that you put together for the use of TIF dollars that come through that collection mechanism. And that the first development agreement will come through for the Kentucky Ridge project, just the north section. And that has to do with the 51 units in the commercial areas that's going on right now. And the reason the city's getting involved in that project is because we had all of that stormwater and sanitary sewer that needed to be fixed and repaired by the developer. And then, of course, they brought in a lot of fill dirt and whatnot to make it a more usable area. And so that's the general terms of that development agreement. In addition to the creation and taking it through to the planning commission, we also had a meeting today with the school district and the county was invited to review it with them. And then there'll be a public hearing on December 2nd, both on the URA as well as on the TIF development agreement that we're putting together. And then that gets approved, and then that one is done. And we've got a whole bunch of others in the pipeline.
Sorry if I missed this piece of the discussion. It feels like something that would have been requested before they started doing all the work.
Mhm.
Is there something to that?
Yes.
Okay.
And so here's the background story on that. The city has several TIF districts throughout the entire community, including one that we're cleaning up that's not on the agenda called the Hillcrest. And this is, we're putting forth a change called Amendment Number 8. A lot of these TIF districts needed to be cleaned up, and Charlie had started that process before leaving. In order to, one, bring them in compliance with state code, but two, we had to remove certain areas out of existing TIF districts so that the money could, instead of going to this bucket, could now go towards the Kentucky Ridge project. And there was a lot of surveying work and negotiating work and cleanup on the Amendment Number 8, Kentucky Ridge, the Summercrest that's going to be coming through in just a second, as well as 3 others that we have going on, which are Emerald Bay, Wesley Life, and Cedar Mountain. So a lot of cleanup work has been done, and they went forward on faith that the city would continue forth with this endeavor, and that the money once they're actually starting the construction and starts generating tax dollars would be able to be used in reimbursement.
That was my question. So really, they took a
Risk.
they took a calculated risk in moving forward.
Right, and it's probably important to note that we did front some money in that regard, and the city will be reimbursed through these TIF dollars as well. on a proportionate share. So they're fronting some and we're fronting some. And I think it's 55%, 45% is the ratio. And as those tax dollars are collected, we'll both be reimbursed until we're made whole. Yep.
Do we have any other questions from the commission?
With regards to TIP funding, in the districts that are dedicated taxes to fund the TIP, what assurances are there later on in life that there's a bucket of money to continue to fund these future projects on an administrator standpoint? It's totally off topic here, but just looking for a little education.
Sure. So everything is based on increment. So not what the tax base is, but what the increment that you're creating. And in this particular case, there was a parcel of property that now is being used for potential commercial spots and 51 spaces. That value of that property has gone up because of the improvements that were made and the earth that was brought in. In addition, further south on the 6th Street sub area, there is the city's public works yard surrounded by the county's public works yard. That had a zero base because we've not been collecting any taxes because they're governmental. And so the increment is substantial in those areas. And as we redevelop that area, we will create new taxes coming in as we get those into the private sector. Those tax dollars coming in can be used to help pay for the infrastructure that brings those improvements. So it creates a win. It's an incentive to create a win all the way along.
But if that's beside the library, how's the tax base going to increase?
So it's
Still
much
some-
larger than the library. It includes the whole 6th Street sub area, which is areas where the library might be. And I say might because there's some private property in there that we're negotiating with. There's the county property, the city property, but it also is inclusive of the elevators, Heartland, all the way out to Ivy and the whole area that can be used to help revitalize that area.
Right.
Yep.
Do any of those, like Hy-Vee, any of those people, do any of those, do they have the opportunity that if money, if it's incorporated in that area?
If they want to make some incremental improvement, like you saw with the Armin Ford. Now, the Armin, they did an expansion and they put a whole new showroom in and all that sort of thing. Because they had their base and that improvement was going to raise new taxes and have an increment, we could have that increment come back to help them in their endeavor. And so if you were just to say Hy-Vee in general, no. But if Hy-Vee wanted to make some kind of an improvement, it was going to raise value, we helped in contributing to that. It's a parking lot that lays out a little differently and easier to park.
Any other questions? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed, same sign. All right, item 6B, review and consideration of the proposed Summercrest urban renewal plan for its conformance with Elevate Indianola comprehensive.
Thank you again. So this is the Summercrest Hills urban renewal plan. As you can see on the map that I provided, it's kind of that area back behind Tyson's on the east side of the highway. The comprehensive plan shows this area as community mixed use, which the comprehensive plan shows as defines as low to medium density residential, retail, offices, restaurants, bars, overnight accommodations, parks, open spaces and trails, automobile oriented uses, and then civic uses and places of worship. The purpose of the proposed urban renewal plan is to provide opportunities, incentives, and sites to promote some significant regional park amenities that would drive restaurant and hotel traffic, as well as enhance commercial businesses and residential developments within this URA. Again, it'll help to incentivize and bring in new opportunities for employment and then additional economic investments into the area. The rest of the information is the same regarding the adoption of the comprehensive plan. Staff does recommend the commission find this urban renewal plan in conformance with the comprehensive plan, and we're happy to take any questions again.
Do we have any questions?
I have a question related again. Ben, so you said something about that comprehensive plan, is that every 10 years? That has to be updated?
That's more of a bill.
Oh.
It's an Iowa thing, and I don't know.
comprehensive plans are set out for a 20, typically a 20-year area.
I just saw that it said 2020, that was the.
That was the full adoption of the new elevated Indianola. And then typically cities will go in every 5 or 10 years to do updates and modifications and things like that.
Before that, it'd been a while.
Sure.
It had been a long while.
Yeah.
Okay, whose plan is this? I see there's a Summercrest Hills Urban Renewal Plan. Whose plan?
So with the urban renewal plan, it is our plan. With the TIF development agreement that will follow on December 2nd, that is being proposed by it's Innovate, it's not Innovate, it's Innovate the Kentucky Bridge. They're both starting with an I. But
I don't know this.
there's a development group in the north area of our community, very closely located to the IWC, that might be involved in this whole thing. And I can share a lot more on December 2nd when all of this gets rolled out. They'll share their story about the development they have planned up there. But in short, it would bring in some significant regional park amenities to that area, which would draw in traffic into potential hotels and restaurants in that area. So it's really exciting for them to share their story on December 2nd. This is just the mechanism by which we can, again, collect tax dollars into a certain bucket.
And that's the Summercrest one, not the Summercrest one.
I'm being intentionally vague so that they can share. But in all reality, all we're really doing tonight is creating the mechanism by which we collect those dollars. And then there'll be a public hearing on the URA, there'll be a public hearing on the development agreement, and a sharing of the overall conceptual view. And of course, as individual plats and all that type of thing come through, that'll highly involve the planning commission in every step.
Do we have any other questions?
I was thinking,
Yeah, I just, as you go through this process, we're asked to recommend and make decisions. So how much does that lock it in?
Yeah, what it really, in
For
this,
both sides?
so in this particular mechanism, all you're really doing is creating the URA, which allows dollars to be segregated into a bucket. That's all you're doing. How those dollars leave the bucket is where your commitment and your question is, and that's in a development agreement that comes later. So it's just the mechanism at this point. But it's important to note that one of the things that will be constructed, something that the city, I can share, is that the city's participation in that is the extension of Willowcrest going east, and the connection of North 7th coming up and North 6th coming up will provide greater connectivity. The city will be taking care of North 7th and Willowcrest. And not only does that expand everything in the area we're talking about to the south of Willowcrest, it also opens up the areas to the north of Willowcrest behind Yarmouth. And then it provides connectivity of that entire subdivision to get out through Willowcrest, which is really nice for police, fire, snow plows, all that.
Sure.
Okay, so I have two follow-up questions. Okay, so that project, that's awesome. Is that a specifically city budget dollars, or will you be bonding based on the TIF?
So that's all part of the development agreement that will come out on December 2nd.
Sorry.
But just I because it's the city portion, city side of it, I can share that. 100% of the TIF collected will be used to make the debt service payments to the city.
Okay.
And then what is left over that is created will be used by the developer for a certain period of time.
Yep.
And it drops over time.
Gotcha. Okay. My second question is, I'm frankly excited to see the city leveraging this tool. My question is, and maybe I should know this living here, but what does the city currently do, or what are the future plans for the LMI set aside for TIF districts?
So in this, we've never had a residential TIF yet, and LMI is only required for residential. I think just over 30%. Our first one will be Wesley Life, and there is some discussion right now on whether Wesley Life will have its own use of those funds for LMI proportionality. or if they will just generate those funds and they will come to the city. If the city starts collecting funds into an LMI, then the city will likely put together some sort of a committee or board similar to what other cities do, evaluating LMI type projects that we might want to collect money for. Of course, it'll take time for us to even collect enough to do anything,
Right.
so it might be several years out before that would move forward. The Kentucky Bridge is commercial based.
Oh, it's not the town hall portion.
No, it's the whole, it's the entire, it's a generalized use and it's the
Okay.
commercial portion. The Summercrest is commercial, although there is a residential component that's excluded from it. Wesley Life and Deer Run and maybe Emerald Bay might have residential. I think Emerald Bay will just be commercial as well. We try to do just commercial so that it stays cleaner, and commercial can go longer at 20 years versus 10. I sound like I know what I'm talking about, but I tell you, I've only learned since Charlie left, and it's because he left and I figured this out.
Get thrown wolves.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad for great attorneys and great financial advisors and great staff, because
Well, because this works differently in Iowa than it does in
Utah.
like Utah or other states, correct?
by all means,
Mhm.
yes.
Have two.
Uh-huh.
What is LMI?
Sorry, I was about to.
Low and
ask
moderate
the
income.
difference.
What is it?
Low to moderate income.
Okay.
So for residential projects, 1/3 of the money collected, the increment has to be used to benefit affordable housing, workforce housing, that type of.
And say when, so like, when we talk about, this is the mechanism to reallocate the bucket that goes into. Is it kind of fair to assume that that bucket's kind of just like stale, maybe where it's at, and we're trying to like generate more or grow that bucket, so that's why we try to reallocate it from here to here? Okay.
So state code and auditors require that the money collected has to be used for the things for which it's collected. And so the bucket that we do have was collected and it actually offsets the YMCA bond debts and whatnot. So there's really nothing stale. We've just pre-collected some and we have the debt service that's going to go out, and those two lines will come together.
Good.
And these other buckets, they will be used for specific purposes, like in this particular case, helping Kentucky Bridge, or in the case of Summercrest, putting in Willett Crest's North 7th and seeing some of the other improvements go forward that the developers responsible.
Correct me if I'm wrong, a lot of these pre-existing developments out there were a benefit to previous funding.
There were areas that overlap and some money had been collected, but specifically,
Yeah, I'm not trying to.
Yeah, it's kind of-
Point that specific.
those
building
were more
or
farm
project.
ground and there wasn't a lot collected in those areas,
Yeah.
and now they're being kind of segregated out. And as they convert from ag to higher
Different zone.
commercial use, the increment will be substantially higher, and that those monies will be allocated.
Maybe I didn't question it, but there's some existing buildings out there today that benefited from this program 10 years ago or what?
Yes, the entire IW's, it was the YMCA bonds, and all of the development, the hotel, everything that you see out there was part of the Hillcrest URA and development agreement.
What's the status of that funding? Is it drained now? Is it gone?
No, in fact, there's about $6 million that has been collected that's sitting in an account, and we have like guessing around $5.5 million worth of debt payments on the IWC before it's fully paid off. But there are other projects by which dollars are going as well, and so all of that lines up, so those lines will come together at the end. We can only collect enough to meet the actual amount that is needed for the debt.
And that source of funding again is, how does that bucket get filled with cash?
So as a developer builds, let's say a country inn, that country inn is now paying taxes. Those taxes, instead of going into the overall city budget, goes into a TIF budget and gets used to pay for the infrastructure of that area.
Infrastructure only.
No, necessarily. It could
Okay.
help in building, let's say, some sort of big, large park amenity to offset the cost of that.
For public use.
Not necessarily. It could be, it can be used for whatever terms you put into the development agreement is negotiated between the city and the developer.
On a case-by-case scenario,
Correct.
which,
And there's guidelines that the state puts in place.
in which the developer who's taking a risk, following up on a previous conversation, is assuming
Correct.
certain dollars are gonna be available to help close the gap if they're debt.
Yes, now there's perhaps some caveats there. Residential can only be used for public infrastructure, and 30% of it, 31 point something percent of it has to go to LMI uses. So residential is a little bit different than commercial. Commercial can go 20 years. Commercial can go for a much more flexible type of construction.
So if there's other, excuse me, if there's other parts on this map that we're looking at that want to be pink, how do they get zoned that way?
So we have, a whole bunch of
For future, I'm not trying to drag out the meeting. I'm just trying to get it.
more of an education, and I'm surprised I'm able to answer any of these questions.
Just like you're gonna leave Iowa, you're learning all about.
You take this knowledge to Utah, so that's great.
I'm making sure I get my money's worth before we leave.
Yeah, whatever. It's not blue, it's not yellow, it's not green, yeah.
Okay, so if you were to look at this map, if I were to project it really large, you would see that there's a whole bunch of TIF districts all along 65, 69, and 92. And so we have a whole bunch of different TIF districts, and this is kind of cleaning up all of this. Is amendment number 8 that's cleaning it.
So the businesses or property people, developers are eligible to draw per an application funding for improvements?
Yes, but
I'm not trying to oversimplify it, but I'm just trying to understand it.
yes, but in order to draw funds from it, they would have to prove that they are bringing increment in. So they might give, for example, Wesley Life, when that comes through, they're going to be putting in about $20 million worth of improvements with about $2 million worth of public improvements. So they're looking for the assistance on the public side, but the actual improvements are much higher.
Sure.
And so the valuations go up and everyone wins.
So just struggling with the first part about what's public use versus private use.
So in that particular one, it's a road with a cul-de-sac and
It's
all
infrastructure.
all the infrastructure.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But then you made a comparison about it could be private.
In residential, it can only be public infrastructure. In commercial, it can be a lot more. Like, for example, when we get to the Deer Run, they have some improvements to their golf course that they are requesting. Whether that gets in it or not, that's up
So
to the city.
it's overall, the goal is an incentive to bring different opportunities.
Absolutely.
So then with the, as Rich was, I think said, there, the allocation of this money comes through application, or does it, or
So they have to,
application into a committee? Who's allocating the?
so they first have to prove that there is going to be the increment. And then it would be a negotiation with the city council on coming up with terms. And so that lays out the path by which they could collect those dollars back. But they have to meet certain milestones, like putting in infrastructure or creation of jobs or putting in a certain amount of valuation. As long as they're hitting their milestones, then those dollars can continue to flow to them. And so there's certain protections along the way to ensure that the city is getting the valuation that's created. But they can't get anything if they don't actually create the valuation or the increase in the debt. So they actually have to make the increment. So it's a good tool all around, but it is very complicated.
And each one of those then has to be accounted for separate,
Yes,
because they are their own bucket.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's
And
very
they can't
true.
transfer from bucket to bucket.
And it can get exponentially complicated if you try to put mini buckets for many milestones along the way. And that's why we try to consolidate.
So in the example of Country Inn, so when they built that and they're now bringing in more tax dollars now, is there a point where their increased tax for Country Inn got rolled over to the city at some point? You said 20 years, is that right? So at 20
It
years.
depends on the terms. I'm not familiar with that development agreement from years ago. But at some point when they meet what was the dollar number that they had negotiated or time runs out. So one of those two things happens first. Then those tax dollars stop going to the developer and they go to the taxing entities, meaning they go to the city, the county, the school district and others.
And then is that 100% of property taxes or is that a portion of their property tax?
It depends on what's negotiated. So sometimes you have what's like a crawlback where they might get 100% tip for a few years and then 90% tip and 80%. That's how-
So I guess the flat rate of a property tax is open to negotiation depending on the developer's intent.
The tax itself isn't negotiated unless they have to set a minimum.
Downstream buckets.
Meaning that whatever is valued by the county and that sets the taxes and whatnot, that they have to pay.
Mhm.
It's just that what they do pay, how we use it and how it goes back, that's what's negotiable.
And
Excuse me.
go ahead.
I recall when the Y was being built, that negotiation establishing that 10th district went on and on and on through multiple meetings.
Mhm.
Or
Mhm.
finally, so I think that's probably typical of most of them.
We're getting, people are using it more and more in the state of Iowa. It's more familiar and more comfortable. And, so they're going through a little easier, but
And that's all through council meetings, correct, that you're talking about now?
Well,
Yeah. All that negotiating and then.
yes, I mean, that's
well,
where.
the negotiations that was presented to the council, discussion, approval, but
Final negotiated contract.
there was a lot of discussion about this at council.
So again, at that point, does the city council not agree with that negotiation and
They could
Yeah.
go to their.
It's all up to the city
Yeah.
council.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
But let's just say that the baton started with Charlie back when I started. So, I'm just carrying over the finish line. He's the one that really did.
I think on this one, on Summercrest,
I would make, not that what I or we say has a ton of bearing, and really, I guess I'll direct it more towards Bill, because you won't be here. But you made a comment that, kind of lean away from the residential tip, because the residential urban renewal areas, just because it's 10 years instead of 20 years. I would make a plea that, and you all know where that I work in affordable housing, right? So I would make a plea that maybe the thought process on that consideration once the Wesley Light District is set up and there is sort of an approach established for the LMI set aside, I would advocate that could be a tool for us to support affordable housing development in Indianola. And so I just don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater because it's 10 years instead of 20. I think it's a tool that we could use as a community to incentivize affordable housing development. So
I can't disagree at all.
is there any money for, what's the one that's going over by the ball yard lost?
schoolhouse,
Schoolyard. Yeah, behind the baseball field.
It's my understanding that there's no tip related to that one.
they got a workforce. For sure.
And typically you go one way or another with tip versus abatement and other, funding opportunities.
Abatement probably more attractive. Well, or did you pass it on to your own buyer or?
And it's less attractive to the school district.
And it's less attractive to the developer. So, yeah, if you're selling homes and you can sell the abatement, although home buyers don't typically necessarily understand that. Whereas TIF can be monetized, there's monetized TIF based on the anticipated cash flow to service the debt. And so as a developer, if you're able to monetize it and use that to finance the infrastructure on the front end and buy down the cost of development, that's where your trade-off is.
Immediate asset.
Yeah,
Were it not for TIF, we could not extend Willow Crest, North Sixth, the developer, or North Seventh, the developer couldn't put in North Sixth or all these improvements. But because of it, they can monetize, we can borrow, they can borrow. It utilizes that revenue stream to pay the debt service and then creates a win for everybody.
Oh, yeah, it definitely seems like a good tool. I mean, because like I said, then hopefully that advances more north growth because now it's more growth going on.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
This is more of a educational experience than it was actual improving of this, the compliance.
All right, all those in favor, say aye.
all right.
Aye. Anyone opposed, same sign. All right, do you have anything for the building permit? What about current project? Would anyone like to make a motion to adjourn?
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right, all those in favor say, oh, wait,